Welcome back, Scotland fans, and this is our series of historic sites around Scotland. We're heading to the far north of mainland Scotland, deep, dark Highlands, and the ruins of Ardvreck Castle.
Yeah, it's the furthest north we've gone so far, isn't it? Not the furthest north you can go, but the furthest north we've gone so far. And Ardvreck Castle, I mean, if you are a capital or romantic, I mean, this has got pretty much everything. It's a ruined castle.
There's not much there.
No, there's really not. On the edge of a loch, surrounded by mountains. Sort of.
Perfect.
Right, what more do you need?
It's a favourite for Instagram, and it's a favourite for photographers because it is such a spectacular scene, but your imagination is having to do most of the work.
Definitely. There's actually a really good expression which is from the Scots poet Hugh MacDiarmid, which is, there are plenty of ruined buildings in the world, but there are no ruined stones. And I would encourage you to keep that phrase in mind when you go to visit Ardvreck Castle, because no ruined stone, no ruined stones. All right, you'll see sort of one finger of a tower left over, and that's it. So to try to get the poetic side out is what I'm saying, to get the most out of Ardvreck.
What do we know about the history then, given that there's not a lot to work with visually?
That's the thing, there's not a lot to work with historically either. There's one or two flashpoints, but what we do know is that the castle was built up in the late 15th century by the MacLeods of Assynt, and MacLeods had lands throughout other parts of the Highlands, particularly Skye. There can be only one, the score. But in that time, the late 15th century, no one is really building massive fortresses anymore. It was a more modest scale of castle building at that point. So when you think of the classic examples of Scottish castles, Calavrock, Dunnottar, Tantallon, that kind of stuff, we're sort of past that phase into a more modest realm of castle building.
Which makes sense, really, given that it's far away from any city or sizable town. So getting resources to that site would be extremely difficult.
Absolutely, and being so far inland as well, you didn't have to worry about too much by way of threats either, so you didn't need a ton to keep it going. But the only real sort of historical moment, per se, that remains to us from Ardvreck Castle is in 1650. That's when the Marquis of Montrose sought shelter there. He had just been beaten in battle by the Covenanters at Carbisdale, and was seeking shelter with Neil MacLeod of the MacLeods of Assynt. The Covenanters, I mean, this is a very, very long story, but probably end up... They were effectively sort of radical Presbyterians acting in defiance of the king, fighting for what they believed in. They signed the Holy Covenant in Greyfriars Kirkyard in Edinburgh, only about a mile from where we're sitting right now recording this, and they were willing to go into battle to fight for their beliefs. And this was a time of tremendous political and religious tension in Scotland, where many people did lay down their lives on all sides. And the Marquis of Montrose was staunchly opposed to them, but having been defeated in battle by them, fled to Ardvreck Castle, and him and the laird, Neil MacLeod, got on pretty well, but Neil couldn't be there all the time. He took off to take care of some business, and the Marquis of Montrose was left in the care of Neil's wife, who lured him down to the dungeon of the castle. Not ominous at all. So, come down into the spooky basement. Something you need to see. Right?
Pay no attention to the chains.
Yeah, he clearly hadn't seen any horror films, right? But he was then locked down in the dungeon, and the Redcoats were called, picked him up, and brought him down to Edinburgh, where he was executed.
So this guy thinks he's going in here, safe as you like.
Yeah,
going to stay with a friend. Cold, remote Highland area. That's what you get.
Exactly.
Welcome aboard.
It's particularly egregious because of the idea of sort of Highland hospitality and guest, right? Yeah. How would you sum up Highland hospitality?
Well, I mean, as soon as you're in, as soon as you've been fed and watered, that's you. You can rest easy. You can close both eyes.
Exactly. That's the idea. Didn't go the Marquis's way in this case, but it's very much sort of a mutual insurance scheme. I'm caught out in a storm, or I need shelter for whatever reason. What happens if your bitter enemy opens up the door that you've just knocked on? Well, ideally you won't tear each other to shreds right then and there, so you are supposed to be allowed in and given shelter, and you do not touch a hair on each other's heads. That's crucial. So this was broken in the most spectacular fashion, in the case of the Marquis. But that is really the only major historical event that took place, and they do say, apparently, if you're into this, that a spectre has been seen haunting the quite gone. There's not much by way of shelter for the ghost to hide in either, actually.
It's a long way as well from Edinburgh.
Yeah, exactly.
North,
yeah, it's not that this grey
decapitated.
Yeah, how far can a ghost travel from his body? You know, it's an esoteric debate.
But he's hanging around there, just keeping things going, spooking out the.
So they say, yeah. And you can see why it'd be easy to get spooked there as well. I mean, the atmosphere is quite desolate.
Yeah.
You're very remote in that area.
It reminds me a bit like a bit of Shakespearean, I suppose. It's got that kind of cragged Cawdor type thing going on. The Scottish play, you start to see it all coming together because of the setting.
Absolutely. Now, when you do, go to visit Ardvreck Castle, chances are you've not gone all the way there just to see Ardvreck Castle. Really, the main draw of the Northwest Highlands is the region as a whole. Spectacular scenery. Yeah. You've done quite a bit of sort of hiking and exploring around there. So, what are your top hits?
Well, I mean, it's an area that struggles for historic sites because it is so remote. So there's not many to pick out in the historic sense, but for hiking things, I mean, Sullivan is one of the iconic walks of Scotland. Stackpolly, Canisp, all these areas around Lochinver, the village really of Lochinver, make for some of the best walking that you'll ever do. And this has all been really spread across Scottish tourism because of the North Coast 500, which really only started a few years ago. Until that point, not many people went to Caithness and Sutherland. It was kind of off limits. But now everybody goes, and we have a bit of an over-tourism issue because there's not a huge amount of facilities there in terms of accommodation, restaurants, that kind of thing, and we're having to manage that incredible number of visitors.
Yeah, and struggling to keep up by way of providing affordable accommodation. For instance, I've had a chat with a number of people up in that area saying that even less than 5 years ago you could get a hotel room for 20 quid. Now 50, 60 is a starting point basically. So it's definitely shaking things up there, and that's something that we're going to have to reckon with.
We have to see, is there potential for more development in terms of expanding these villages, perhaps to bring in accommodation. Tourism is absolutely vital to Scotland's economy, of course, so we can't say, oh no, just leave it, let's not bother, let's just leave people to their own devices. We have to try and provide those facilities, and it's such a spectacular part of the country, and it's been quantified into 500 miles, the circuit route via Inverness and all the way up around that coastline, that makes it much easier for people to understand and digest and take it on over the course of possibly 1 or maybe even 2 weeks.
Yeah, and speaking from experience, one of the best things to do if you are visiting that area, just on a logistical front, is plan in advance. I've been stuck a couple of times actually because I left things fairly to chance, or I left it even to within a fortnight for booking accommodation and everything, and it's all booked up. So if we go one piece of advice for visiting this spectacular area of Scotland, it's get your ducks in a line well in advance of your actual trip, and that will guarantee a lack of headaches.
Yes, definitely. But it's a difficult site to get to without a car as well, unfortunately. I mean, you cycle a lot, but getting up there is tricky.
Yeah, full confession, I've not actually been to Ardvreck Castle, and I should just leave. What am I even doing here, right? But yeah, it's quite a distance even from Ullapool, and there is a bus which runs from Inverness to Ullapool that you can put a couple bikes on, but only a handful. So you are talking, if you want to visit Ardvreck Castle by bike, you're talking probably a 50-60 mile round trip, something like that, from the nearest settlements. So that's something to bear in mind. But it's a relatively recent phenomenon actually that area of the Northwest Highlands is as remote and depopulated and scarce as it is. We'll probably end up talking in greater detail about these sorts of themes in the future, but Sutherland in particular was an area which was devastated by the Highland clearances. It's a difficult.
One of the saddest chapters in Scotland's story, when after Culloden and the Jacobite defeat, crofters, farmers were moved off their land and told by the landowners that they were less valuable to them than the sheep, and would therefore be deported to the New World, and they had to leave their homes and their country behind. Yeah,
so if you wonder why there's so many sheep in the Highlands, it wasn't always that way. The population of Scotland used to be much more sort of evenly dispersed, with the Highlands rivaling the Lowlands in terms of population right up until the late 18th century, and that is when the clearances started to kick off. The clearances in Sutherland were especially brutal. The Duke and Duchess of Sutherland infamously, mercilessly sent thousands of people into ships with horrendous conditions to the four corners of the British Empire, and this is one of the reasons why you have Scots diaspora populations in places like Nova Scotia, where I'm from, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa even, and in many of these voyages, fewer than 50% of the people survived, which is just atrocious. So that's one thing to bear in mind is, we look at this area of Scotland as being very remote, desolate, uncivilized, all these kinds of words that people bandy about. But in the broad scheme of things, this is a pretty new development. And we are sort of experimenting with this format, guys. So we've been dealing quite specifically with particular historic sites to date, but we really do want to explore some of the deeper themes in Scotland's story as well. So if you're keen to hear that, we would love to get that feedback from you. If there are any locations or ideas or themes, personalities, you name it, that you would like to hear us tuck into, we are wide open and waiting for your queries. So be sure, of course, to give a like if you're enjoying this, subscribe to keep up to date with our future content as well, and we'll look forward to getting those questions from you.
We will indeed. See you next time.
Cheers.